Hi guys, my name is Allison Seiber and this is History on Tap. Today's talk will focus on Athens, Tennessee, in McMinn County, a small town located in between two major cities, Chattanooga and Knoxville. It is home to Tennessee Wesleyan University, where yours truly attends as a current bio student. And I consider myself a little bit of a history nerd, and I wouldn't say that I'm too knowledgeable in the history department, but I will graduate with a history minor. Some of my interests are in environmental history, women's suffrage, American Indians, etc., which is fantastic because sweet old Athens has a little bit of everything. I'll just divide this podcast up into a few topics such as American Indians, the Cherokee, Athens logging railroads, women's suffrage, and finally, perhaps the most famous piece of Athens history, the Battle of Athens. I pulled my information from websites, news clippings, videos, and books that I'll list down in the description below. Now, let's go to the podcast. As we all know, there were native people that are already residing on this continent way before colonialism ever did. As for Athens, Tennessee, they had a native peoples called the Cherokee, the Ute, and the Creek. As from what I've seen during my time here in Athens, is that the history in the overall town seems to focus mainly on the Cherokee people and not necessarily the other two American Indian groups. I just believe this is because the Cherokee were the ones who remained in the area for the longest amount of time because of their powerful demeanor. They're known to push out the Creek in alliance with the U.S. government. I think this is just how it just came to be. So anyways, McMinn County, that county of Athens, had three main Cherokee villages that were prominent before the Hiwassee Purchase of 1819, or 1817 as multiple sources make the claims between the two dates. I've read a lot of different websites and articles about this, and I can't get a clear indication of which one is the true date. However, this still had the same purpose. The Hiwassee Purchase was just a treaty that revoked American Indian claims on land because they sold it to the U.S. state's federal government to make room for white settlers. McMinn County's Cherokee lost their claim to their land, but there was a large acreage of reservation land connected to an important Cherokee individual, and his name was Principal Chief John Ross on the Hiwassee River, was where he was connected at. So Principal Chief John Ross was a great leader and advocator for his Cherokee people's rights during the 1800s. He was born of Scottish and Cherokee lineage, and he was a well-educated individual who was able to converse in Cherokee and English. This made him great for negotiations between the U.S. state's government and the Cherokee people. He also helped with, along with some other Cherokee individuals, set up National Cherokee Council, a Cherokee Constitution, and a capital city, New Echota in Georgia. He was elected as the principal chief of the Cherokee, and he represented his people at Washington, D.C. in their refusal to give up the Cherokee land. Even so, the Treaty of New Echota was signed by other Cherokee members who weren't authorized of the purchase of Cherokee lands and a promise to move west in the next 2 years. Ross was adamant in his stance against selling their land and moving, and he continued to rage on against the U.S. government, but lost a couple of years later and was forced to move to Oklahoma, an arduous, deadly journey on foot, wagon, or horse, and this is just known as the Trail of Tears in 1838. Sadly, Ross lost his wife because of the harsh circumstances of the trail, but he was able to regroup his people in Oklahoma. He set up a new capital, opened schools, new public buildings, and led them as a people in the bleak conditions they were given. Similar stories are shared all over McMinn County about the Cherokee people. They were assimilated into early white settlers' communities of McMinn County, and their children would attend white children's schools. However, the American Indian Removal Act of 1838 pushed them out of McMinn County and pushed them westward. The U.S. government forced American Indians into stockades or camps before the removal, and also into immigrating depots. And one of the largest depots was Fort Cass in what is now Charleston, Tennessee, which is just located 20 minutes outside of Athens. Fort Cass was the U.S. Army headquarters for the American Indian removal, It was first established as a scare tactic where the Army was trying to push the Cherokee out of the area before the actual roundup. The U.S. Army made use of pre-existing buildings in the area, such as Lewis Ross' home, the brother of Principal Chief John Ross, who I mentioned previously. Fort Cass had multitudes of American Indian camps where American Indians remained for the entire summer of 1838 because of complications in the roundup itself and the removal process before they were forced to move westward. Diseases were rampant in the summer months among the Cherokee camps at Fort Cass, and this killed numerous Cherokee off preceding their removal. Some of the diseases were whooping cough, and a lot of times this affected their immune system, so the ones who did survive the camps had an early death normally on the actual journey itself. The Army divided the Cherokee into 12 groups preceding the removal, and when the time for the removal came, they made the march during the months of August and December. The last Cherokee group left McMinn County and Fort Cass on December 5th, 1838. Well, after the removal of the Cherokee people in McMinn County, it made room for the white settlers to move in. In 1819, McMinn County was officially open for white settlers to move in, but the white settlers wanted the entirety of the county for themselves, hence its involvement in the American Indian removal. A location called Pumpkin Town was the predecessor's name to Athens before being changed in 1821, and the change to Athens was credited because of the hills in Athens, Tennessee, and it reminded the person who named it of the hills in Athens, Greece. Pumpkin Town, as some of you guys live in Athens, is a fall festival that we have here every year, and it is in honor of this name and, of course, fall time. The county seat changed to Athens in 1823. Officially, the white settlers were granted full rights to the land at the removal of the American Indians in 1838 and evolved into a small white-dominated town that has future history that I will soon get into discussion about. So, in 1905, the Tellico River Lumber Company at Tellico Plains, Tennessee, was created, and this is just located about 40 minutes away from Athens. This company was vital because it utilized a logging railroad that ran from Tellico Plains, up the Tellico River, and through Athens, Tennessee. Despite its benefits for the economy and job occupations in Athens, it had disastrous effects on the environment. Logging did clear cutting of Tellico's forest, which is detrimental to the native species, many fires, lack of mineral soil, and soil erosion. The land is now protected as a national park and national forest, though. However, it still has some serious effects to the environment that we can see today. The Tellico Railroad is the railroad I mentioned previously. The railroad was incorporated in 1877 as the Tellico Railroad Company before exchanging hands in 1910 to the Louisville and Nashville Railroad, otherwise known as the L&N Railroad. It spanned on an average of 24 miles long, going through Tellico, Inglewood, and Athens, and connects to the Southern Railway. Tellico Railroad was later converted into the current Tellico River Road, and the Athens portion into a 7.3-mile walking, biking, and horseback riding trail, otherwise known as Eureka Trail. The railroad was considered abandoned and was acquired by the Athens community. On one of the websites I looked at about the railroad and trail, someone commented and made the claim that the structures of the railroad that remain there could be at least 100 years old. The Eureka Trail lets you visit these areas by having the little trails lead off the main path for exploration. And I just love visiting this place as it is a great way to reconnect with nature, recreational activities, and admire the historical presence that's found there. Athens, Tennessee also has a cute fun fact. I'm all for women empowerment and rights, and Athens lays claims to having the final say on the matter. I mean, I live right next door to the beautiful women's suffrage mural in downtown Athens. How cool is that? Athens has an icon of a woman. Febb E. Byrne should be revered as a hometown hero. I would love to see a dedication strictly for her at TW campus as she graduated from the same university. then called U.S. Grant Memorial University. She married James Ellis Burns and had 4 children, the oldest being Harry Byrne, the one who voted for women's rights and the dividing factor of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. She took over the reins of the family farm and mill after James passed, demonstrating strength and tenacity against her men counterparts, and she followed the women's suffrage movement closely by scouring the newspapers regarding it. When the ratification was up to vote and Tennessee called for a special session, she wrote a letter to her son, who was a part of the state legislature, Harry Byrne. Harry Byrne was intimidated by party leaders to vote against the ratification, and he was sporting a red rose on the voting day, signifying that he was against it, hence the War of the Roses, as it was called during that time. His vote would be the final say on women's rights in the nation. However, the rose was not the only thing he was sporting, as he had his mother's letter hidden safely in his pocket. The letter read, "Dear son, hoorah, and vote for suffrage and don't keep them in doubt. I noticed Chandler's speech. It was very bitter. I've been watching to see how you stood, but have not seen anything yet. Don't forget to be a good boy and help Miss Thomas Cat with her rats. Is she the one that put rat in ratification? Ha! No more from Mama this time. With lots of love, Mama." When the House of Representatives were tied, all focus lay on Harry to hear what his tie-breaking vote would be. And Harry did as his mother wished and voted for women's rights. I mean, after all, mother does know best in this situation. Now, as much as I want to say that women's suffrage movement was what brought Athens to acclaim, I think that honor lies with an equally interesting story of a battle between a political machine and war veterans in downtown Athens. But to set the stage for such an exhilarating performance, I'm going to take a step back and look at the world's conditions before. I also feel the need to say that the Battle of Athens can be a touchy subject, as there are multiple interpretations of the events that take place. I'll try to remain unbiased as possible with what I say. Athens as a town is one might expect it to be, especially during the time of the war. It was a slow farming town, and it didn't have a lot going on since it didn't have a lot of main roads leading to large cities branching Athens, such as Knoxville or Chattanooga. Although there was a lot of movement in the political side of Tennessee. E.H. Crump was a Democratic mayor in Memphis, Tennessee, who gave large support to Franklin D. Roosevelt, the U.S. president at the time. Crump had high popularity in Memphis. He was advocating for improved living conditions of white and black communities, even though he was a staunch segregationist. He voted for child labor, public health, transportation, etc. He voted for the improvement of these things, by the way. As much as these things are good, he did allow and encourage political corruption in his favor. He created a massive political machine affecting the rest of Tennessee, all the way to Athens. Now, what is a political machine? This is where a party will recruit its members by illegal or questionable methods such as money or political jobs. Paul Cantrell is one of the suspected members of Crump's party, but I cannot claim that for certain as there are many sources that have differing opinions on that statement. In 1936, Paul Cantrell, a Democratic candidate for sheriff in McMinn County, gained control of the county through a system that involved charging a fee for every person they booked, incarcerated, and released. This system was profitable, but record keeping was required and the money could be traced. This led to wide-scale corruption in McMinn County and public outcry. The Cantrell machine gained prominence in McMinn County, Tennessee, because a group of around 3,000 men went off to fight during the war. The World War vets returned and formed a nonpartisan political party in 1946, with a focus on the race for sheriff between Knox Henry and Paul Cantrell. He was re-elected, by the way. The GI veterans were upset because of a worry of a fraudulent election and the excessive fee booking that were demonstrated by the deputies. Advertisements in the Post-Athenian, the newspaper of Athens, highlighted the Democratic Party's accomplishment, Mansfield's denial of election whiskey, and the veterans offering a reward for verifiable information about election fraud. During the election, vets from Blount County offered to watch the polls, and Sheriff Mansfield began building an army of his own. Trouble began early, with Walter Ellis, a legally appointed GI representative, arrested and jailed for protesting irregularities. GIs began gathering at Washington Street outside L.L. Schaefer's jewelry store, which served as their campaign manager, Jim Byrum. Odo Kennedy, a political advisor to the veterans, announced that Control had posted armed guards at each precinct in preparation for the 4 p.m. closings when ballot boxes would be moved to the jail for counting. A small group of veterans demanded an armed mobilization and called for a leader. Byrum declined, and Kennedy offered the rear of his Escanay garage and tire shop as a meeting hall. The Control forces planned to control the 1st, 11th, and 12th precincts in Athens and one in Etowah to secure the election. However, by 6 p.m., the election seemed to be over, and unhappy crowds moved quietly along the streets. Bill White, an ex-sergeant who had fought in the Pacific, harangued the group of veterans in the Escanay, telling them to get guns. The night exploded in automatic weapons fire, punctuated by shotgun blasts. The veterans bombarded the jail for hours, but Control and his accomplices refused to surrender. However, rumors compounded their fears. The veterans were eager to end the battle, making Molotov cocktails or going to the county supply house for dynamite. The gasoline bombs proved ineffective, but at 2:30 a.m., the dynamite arrived. An ambulance pulled around to the north side of the jail, and 2 men jumped in, but instead of returning to the hospital, the ambulance sped north out of town. The Control forces surrendered because of their wariness and worries of being killed, and then the GIs were declared the victors, and having accomplished the first successful armed revolution since the American Revolutionary War. With the Control forces conquered, 10 years of suppressed rage exploded, and the townsmen set upon the captured deputies. However, the GIs captured the forces and jailed them for the night. On August 4th, Pat Mansfield resigned as the sheriff for McMinn County and appointed Knox Henry as sheriff by a landslide. After their victory, the 5 GIs elected to office announced they would return all fees more than $5,000. The national press continued to show interest in the Athens rebellion, but the press turned away from the town later on, with disinterest from the town participants. Knox Henry served 2 terms as sheriff and was succeeded by Odo Kennedy. In my personal opinion, I think not having a lot of media coverage and movies or books written about the Battle of Athens might have been better for the town in general, as they were able to overcome the event and not have any more harsh feelings towards each opposing side. I talked to multiple sources on this, and I feel like this was the best way for them to overcome what happened. I believe that having the town itself not focus too much on the Battle of Athens was able to make the families that were involved in both sides overcome the pains and sufferings and allowed them to move on. Okay, this is approaching the end to my podcast, and I am most appreciative of everyone listening. And I just want to say a couple thank yous, most specifically McMinn County Living Heritage Museum. The people there have been so supportive and helpful. They've given me so many different sources on what to read, gave me advice on how to make this podcast, and introduced me to some lovely people that I've been able to talk to. That leads me to my next point. I am so thankful to Ann Davis and Paul Wilson. Your families have been involved in this Battle of Athens, and you guys were able to share with me such wonderful details on the subject itself. And you guys just have such a wonderful personality and was so supportive as well as the museum. And I just want to say thank you. And finally, I want to say thank you to my professor, Dr. Seitz. You helped me create a wonderful project, something I definitely would not have done on my own if not pushed into, and I think this turned out quite well. Anyways, this is me signing off. Bye!